Beverly experiences the shocking moment when her coworker Stephanie dramatically accuses her during a team meeting of selling company files to competitors. Everyone stares in disbelief as Stephanie presents evidence of data transfers linked to Beverly's credentials. Beverly feels her world crumbling as her boss's face shifts from shock to disappointment. 7 years of dedicated work suddenly questioned. Beverly attempts to defend herself, but Stephanie's carefully constructed narrative drowns out her protests. Beverly realizes this isn't just a misunderstanding, it's a calculated attack on her career and reputation. I still remember the day Stephanie first walked into our office at Tech Vision Solutions. Her confident stride and polished appearance immediately commanded attention as Andrew, our department head, introduced her as our new senior marketing coordinator. I had been with the company for 7 years at that point, working my way up from an entry-level position to become one of the lead marketing analysts. The Boston skyline visible from our 42nd floor windows had witnessed my growth from a nervous college graduate to a respected team member. "Beverly will show you the ropes," Andrew had said, placing his hand on my shoulder. "She knows this place better than anyone." I smiled and extended my hand to Stephanie. "Welcome aboard. Let me know if you need anything." Her smile seemed genuine then. "Thanks, Beverly. I've heard great things about you. I'm so excited to work together." Those first few weeks were pleasant enough. Stephanie asked thoughtful questions, brought coffee for the team, and seemed eager to integrate herself into our company culture. We even grabbed lunch together a few times, where she complimented my work on the customer analytics platform I was developing, a project that could potentially revolutionize how our software interacted with user data. "This platform could change everything," I explained over our salads one day. "If we get it right, companies will be able to predict customer needs before they even recognize them themselves." "That sounds amazing," Stephanie replied, her eyes widening with what I mistook for admiration. "You must be so proud to lead something so important." The shift was subtle at first, small things that I might have overlooked if they happened in isolation. A report I sent to Stephanie for review would come back days later than promised, nearly missing crucial deadlines. Files I was certain I had saved would somehow be corrupted when I needed them most. Team emails sometimes excluded me from important conversations. "I swear I added you to the thread," Stephanie would say, with a puzzled expression. The system must have glitched. The breaking point came during a presentation to Megacorp, one of our biggest potential clients. I had prepared for weeks, fine-tuning every detail of my pitch for our analytics platform. But when I opened my presentation file, the key demonstration videos and data visualizations were missing or damaged. "I checked everything last night," I whispered frantically to Jessica, my mentor and the sales director. "It was all perfect. Just do your best," she whispered back, squeezing my arm supportively. I stumbled through the presentation, trying to describe features I couldn't show. The clients exchanged concerned glances, and by the end, their enthusiasm had visibly cooled. Andrew called me into his office afterward, his expression grave. "What happened out there, Beverly?" he asked, his voice tinged with disappointment. "We've been courting Megacorp for months." "I don't know," I replied, feeling a knot forming in my stomach. "Everything was ready last night. I triple-checked it." Andrew sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. "This isn't like you. You're usually so reliable." That evening, I stayed late, trying to understand what had gone wrong. The office was nearly empty, just the cleaning staff and a few developers working against deadlines. I scrolled through my files, checking modification timestamps, when something caught my eye. Several of my most important files had been accessed and modified in the early morning hours, around 2 a.m., when I had been sound asleep at home. I felt a chill run down my spine. Someone had accessed my computer using my login credentials when I wasn't there. But who? And why? The next morning, I approached Stephanie directly. She was alone in the break room, stirring cream into her coffee. "Did you notice anything strange about the presentation files yesterday?" I asked, trying to keep my tone casual. She looked up, her expression innocent. "No, why?" Besides the obvious problems during the presentation, some files were modified in the middle of the night, using my login. Something flickered across her face, so quickly I almost missed it. Was it alarm? Concern? But then her expression softened into sympathy. That's terrible, Beverly. Maybe you should change your password. People can be so unethical. Yeah, I said slowly. People can be. As I turned to leave, she added, by the way, I meant to tell you. Andrew asked me to take point on the next phase of the analytics platform. Just until things settled down after the megacorp situation. I froze mid-step, feeling as though I'd been doused with ice water. The analytics platform was my project, my baby. I had conceptualized it, built the framework, led every aspect of its development. He didn't mention that to me, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. Stephanie shrugged, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. He probably hasn't had a chance yet. I'm sure it's just temporary. But as I walked back to my desk, a sinking feeling told me that something was very wrong at Tech Vision Solutions. And somehow, Stephanie was at the center of it. The quarterly team meeting started like any other. 20 of us gathered in the glass-walled conference room, laptops open, coffee cups steaming. Andrew stood at the head of the table reviewing our progress and outlining upcoming goals. I was distracted, still upset about being sidelined from my analytics project, but trying to maintain a professional demeanor. Before we wrap up, Andrew said, checking his watch, does anyone have updates to share? Stephanie raised her hand, her expression somber. Actually, I have something concerning to report. The room quieted. Andrew nodded for her to continue. I was reviewing our server access logs for the analytics project, Stephanie began, her voice carrying perfectly in the hushed room, and I discovered something disturbing. She turned her laptop around, displaying a series of email screenshots and server logs on the projector screen. My name and user ID were highlighted throughout. These logs show someone using Beverly's credentials to transfer confidential product specifications and client data to an external server. Her voice dropped dramatically. A server registered to Comptech. Comptech was our biggest competitor. The room erupted in murmurs. That's impossible, I said, my voice sounding distant even to my own ears. Stephanie continued as if I hadn't spoken. I didn't want to believe it either. Beverly has been here so long. But the evidence is clear. She clicked through to another screen. These emails show communication between Beverly's personal email account and contacts at Comptech discussing payment terms. The emails looked real. My email address, my signature line, but I had never written them. This is absurd, I said, standing up, my heart pounding against my ribcage. I've never contacted anyone at Comptech. Those emails are fake. Andrew's face had gone from shocked to grim. Beverly, Megan from HR, and I need to speak with you privately. Now, Jessica, who had been my mentor since I started at Tech Vision, wouldn't meet my eyes as I gathered my things. The colleague who had sat next to me for 3 years subtly shifted his chair away, as if betrayal might be contagious. In Andrew's office, Megan from HR was already waiting, her expression unreadable. Beverly, Andrew began. These are extremely serious allegations. They're false allegations, I interrupted. Someone is setting me up. Megan slid a document across the table. We need to place you on administrative leave pending a full investigation. Your accounts will be suspended, and we'll need your company laptop and access card. You can't be serious, I said, feeling lightheaded. 7 years, Andrew. You know me. I thought I did, he replied, his voice flat. But the evidence is compelling. If this is a misunderstanding, the investigation will clear it up. Within 20 minutes, security was escorting me through the office to collect my personal belongings. Faces peered over cubicle walls, conversations halted mid-sentence. Stephanie stood by the marketing department entrance, her expression a perfect mask of disappointment and betrayal. As I passed, she whispered just loud enough for me to hear, "Such a shame. You had such potential." The security guard, Ted, who had greeted me with a smile every morning for years, now watched my every move as I emptied my desk into a cardboard box. family photos, a plant my team had given me on my 5th work anniversary, a coffee mug that read Marketing Genius. "I'm sorry about this," Ted murmured as we waited for the elevator. "Procedure, you know." I nodded numbly, unable to form words. At home, I discovered my work email was already inaccessible. Calls to colleagues went straight to voicemail. It was as if 7 years of my professional life had been erased in an afternoon. I sat on my couch, staring at the wall, trying to make sense of what had happened. Who would go to such lengths to frame me? And why? My phone chimed with a text from an unknown number. "Some secrets should stay buried. Stop digging or things get worse." A wave of nausea washed over me. This wasn't just about getting me fired. Someone wanted to destroy me completely. I was still staring at the message when a knock at my door startled me. I approached cautiously, peering through the peephole. It was Grace, my next-door neighbor. A retired woman in her 60s who often brought me cookies and asked about my work. I opened the door, trying to compose myself. "Beverly, are you all right?" she asked, concern etching her kind face. "I saw you come home in the middle of the day. You looked upset." Something about her grandmotherly concern broke the dam. Tears spilled down my cheeks as I explained what had happened. Grace listened without interruption, then surprised me by asking, "May I see those server logs and emails Stephanie showed everyone?" "I don't have access to them," I said, wiping my eyes. "Everything's locked." Grace said, her expression thoughtful. "You know, I didn't mention this before because it never came up, but I worked in cybersecurity for 30 years before retiring." "At the NSA?" I blinked in surprise. "You what?" she smiled. "People underestimate old ladies. That's actually an advantage in security work." Her expression turned serious again. "What happened to you today sounds like a sophisticated setup, and if someone went to all that trouble, they must have a very good reason." As we talked, I started making connections I hadn't seen before. The mysterious file corruptions, the missing emails, the late-night access to my account. "We need to establish a timeline," Grace said, suddenly all business. "When did these strange occurrences start?" I thought back. "Around when Stephanie joined the company, 8 months ago." Grace nodded. "And have you noticed anyone else having similar problems?" I was about to say no when I remembered something. Actually, 3 people from my department left in the last 6 months, all under different circumstances. Daniel was accused of budget mismanagement. Alicia supposedly shared confidential information with a friend. And Jordan had that blow-up with management about project ownership. And did Stephanie have conflicts with any of them? The pieces were starting to align. Yes, all of them. Grace's eyes narrowed. "I think you need to contact those former colleagues." As evening fell, I was about to call it a night when my phone chimed with an email notification. The subject line made my heart skip. Not what it seems. The email contained no text, just 3 screenshots. They showed partial server logs, different from the ones Stephanie had presented. These logs showed someone accessing the system using my credentials, but the IP address was unfamiliar. Not my home, not the office. I forwarded the email to Grace, my hands shaking. Within minutes, my phone rang. "Beverly?" Grace's voice was urgent. "Whoever sent this is taking a big risk to help you. These logs suggest someone remotely accessed the system using your credentials from an external location. Do you have any idea who might have sent this?" I thought of the faces around the conference table. Who would risk their own job to help me? "I don't know," I admitted. "But it means someone else at Tech Vision doubts Stephanie's story." "It means you're not alone," Grace corrected. "And that's exactly what you need right now." The next morning I woke up with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt since being escorted from the building. If someone was framing me, I needed to understand why, and I needed proof to clear my name. I created a detailed timeline on my living room wall, using sticky notes to mark every suspicious incident since Stephanie's arrival. The pattern was clear once I laid it all out. Each problem coincided with Stephanie inserting herself into a new project or forming a connection with a different executive. Grace arrived with bagels and her personal laptop. First rule of investigation, she said, setting up on my dining table. Understand the technical aspects of how you were compromised. She explained how credential theft typically worked, the methods hackers used to gain access to secure systems, and how logs could be manipulated to hide the true source of a breach. The good news, she said, pointing to the anonymous email screenshots, is that these logs suggest the actual breach originated from outside the company network. If we can prove that, it helps your case. While Grace worked on analyzing the technical evidence, I decided to reach out to the former employees who had left under suspicious circumstances. Daniel's phone number was disconnected, but I found Alicia on social media and sent her a message explaining my situation. Her response came within minutes. I've been waiting for someone else to see through her. Call me. Over the phone, Alicia's story mirrored mine with eerie similarity. Stephanie befriended me, got me to share access to projects. Then, suddenly files went missing and sensitive information was accidentally leaked to a client. They fired me without even a proper investigation. Did you try to defend yourself? I asked. Of course, but Stephanie had already poisoned everyone against me. Made subtle comments about my carelessness for weeks. By the time it happened, people were primed to believe I was the problem. By midday, Jordan had also responded to my outreach with a similar story. 3 former employees, all undermined and ousted after conflicts with Stephanie. The pattern was undeniable, but the most valuable information came from an unexpected source. While searching for contact details for Daniel, I found an online profile for a Taylor J. who listed TechVision as a previous employer. The dates matched Daniel's tenure, but the name was different. I sent a message explaining who I was and asking if they knew Daniel. The response was immediate. Daniel legally changed his name to Taylor after leaving TechVision. The experience there ruined his professional reputation so completely that he had to start over. What has she done to you? We arranged to meet at a coffee shop far from the TechVision offices. Taylor arrived wearing sunglasses and a baseball cap despite the cloudy day. I still get paranoid, he explained, removing the disguise once we were seated in a corner booth. Stephanie destroyed my life. How? I asked, pushing a coffee toward him. She was fired from her previous job at CompTech, Taylor revealed, lowering his voice. She never told anyone at TechVision, obviously. I discovered it accidentally through a mutual connection. When I confronted her privately, suggesting she should have disclosed this conflict of interest, she promised to talk to HR herself. He laughed bitterly. 2 weeks later, I was being investigated for financial misconduct, transactions I never authorized, using my login credentials. My blood ran cold. That's exactly what's happening to me. Taylor nodded grimly. She's been doing this for years, moving between competitor companies, gathering information, causing chaos. The question is why? What does she gain? As I walked home from the meeting, I noticed my LinkedIn connections were dwindling. Former colleagues removing their associations with me. The public shaming had begun. My phone rang with an unknown number. It was Andrew from TechVision. Beverly, he said, his voice tense. I'm calling to formally inform you that we're moving forward with termination based on the evidence of corporate espionage. HR will send the paperwork. I'm sorry it came to this. Andrew, please, I said quickly. I'm being set up. Stephanie, don't make this worse by throwing accusations, he cut me off. We have evidence, Beverly. Irrefutable evidence. After he hung up, I sat on a park bench, watching people go about their normal lives, feeling as though mine was crumbling around me. The gravity of the situation was crushing. I could lose everything, my career, my reputation, possibly even face criminal charges. My sister Amanda called that evening. I saw your text. What do you mean you've been fired for corporate espionage? That's insane. I explained everything, my voice breaking several times. I'm coming over, she said firmly. Pack a bag. You're staying with me for a few days. You shouldn't be alone right now. Amanda arrived 2 hours later, having driven straight from her home in Providence. She took one look at my timeline wall and the scattered notes and pulled me into a hug. "We're going to fix this," she promised. "I've never known you to give up, and you're not starting now." The next morning, a local tech news site published an article about allegations of corporate espionage at Tech Vision Solutions. Though it didn't name me directly, anyone in the industry could connect the dots. "They're getting ahead of the story," Amanda said, reading over my shoulder. "Controlling the narrative before you can defend yourself." I felt a wave of desperation. How do I fight this when they hold all the cards? "By finding someone inside who still believes in you," Amanda replied. I thought of Jessica, my mentor, who had looked away when I was being accused. Would she even talk to me? I sent her a text. 7 years of friendship deserves at least one conversation. "Coffee at Nelson's tomorrow? Please." For hours there was no response. Then, just before midnight, 3 p.m. "Don't be late." Jessica was already waiting when I arrived at the small coffee shop, seated in the farthest corner, her back to the wall. She looked tired, with dark circles under her eyes. "You have 15 minutes, she said as I sat down. "I'm risking a lot just being seen with you." "I didn't do it, Jess," I said, meeting her eyes. "You know me better than that." She looked down at her coffee. "The evidence is fabricated," I interrupted. "Stephanie has done this before. At CompTech, where she worked before TechVision." Jessica's head snapped up. "What?" I quickly outlined what I'd learned from Taylor and the others. Jessica listened, her expression shifting from skepticism to uncertainty. "That would explain some things," she admitted. "James in IT mentioned finding inconsistencies in the access logs, but management told him to drop it." "James found evidence that could help me?" Jessica glanced at her watch, then quickly reached into her bag and slid a USB drive across the table. "I shouldn't be doing this," she whispered, "but James gave me this. Said if anyone asked." I never saw it. I stared at the small device. "What's on it?" "Access logs, the real ones, before someone altered them." She stood up. "I have to go. Be careful, Beverly. If what you're saying about Stephanie is true, she's dangerous." As she turned to leave, I caught her hand. "Thank you for believing in me." Jessica squeezed my hand briefly. I never stopped. Grace whistled low when I showed her the USB drive. "This is either a breakthrough or a trap," she said, examining it cautiously. "Let's be careful." We used her old work laptop, disconnected from the internet, to view the contents. The drive contained dozens of corrupted files, but Grace's expertise allowed us to recover enough data to see the truth. "Look at this pattern," she said, pointing to sequences of numbers on the screen. "Multiple credential breaches, not just yours. Someone accessed the system using various employee logins over the past 8 months." I leaned closer. "Can you tell who?" "Not directly, but we can track the IP addresses." Grace's fingers flew over the keyboard. "Many of these breaches came from the same external location. We spent hours analyzing the data, mapping access times against known locations of various employees. A pattern emerged. Someone had been systematically using different credentials to copy and transfer data, creating a complex web of apparent security violations that would be nearly impossible to unravel without expert analysis. "This is sophisticated," Grace admitted. "Professional level, industrial espionage." While Grace continued her technical investigation, I received an official termination letter via email. The sterile corporate language labeled me a security risk and threatened legal action if I attempted to access any company's systems or contact TechVision clients. Almost simultaneously, the company sent a mass email announcing Stephanie's promotion to my former position. The message praised her integrity and commitment to company security. "She's not even trying to hide it," I said, showing Amanda the email. "She wanted my job all along." "It's more than that," Amanda replied thoughtfully. "If she's gone to these lengths, there must be a bigger payoff." That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Taylor's question. What does Stephanie gain? The promotion was one thing, but the elaborate frame-up suggested larger motives. On a hunch, I started researching CompTech's recent product announcements. What I found sent a chill down my spine. They had just previewed a new customer analytics platform with features suspiciously similar to the project I had been developing at TechVision. "She's been stealing our technology," I whispered to the empty room. "My technology." The next morning, I called IT Director James directly, using the number Jessica had secretly provided. "I can't talk to you," he said immediately upon answering. "Please, James. I know you found inconsistencies in the logs. I have the USB drive." A long pause followed. "Meet me at Riverside Park in 1 hour." By the boathouse. James looked nervous when we met, constantly scanning the area as if expecting to be followed. "I could lose my job for this," he said, sitting beside me on a park bench. "I already lost mine," I reminded him, "for something I didn't do." He sighed heavily. "The evidence against you was too perfect. That's what bothered me. In real security breaches, people make mistakes. This was like someone created a textbook case of corporate espionage." "Someone did," I confirmed. "Stephanie." James nodded slowly. "When I started digging deeper, I found traces of log manipulation, but when I brought it up to Andrew, he shut me down immediately, said the investigation was concluded." "Why would Andrew ignore evidence that might exonerate me?" "That's what's been eating at me," James admitted. "It doesn't make sense unless he's involved somehow," I finished. James looked uncomfortable. "I didn't say that. You didn't have to." I showed him what Grace and I had discovered about the pattern of breaches. "This is serious," James said, reviewing the data on my tablet. "Corporate espionage on this scale could be worth millions." "I need your help to prove it," I said. James hesitated. "I want to help Beverly, but I have a family, a mortgage." "I understand," I said, trying to hide my disappointment. "But will you at least look at anything else we find? Give us your professional opinion?" After a moment, he nodded. "Send it through a secure channel." "And Beverly? Watch your back. If Stephanie realizes you're investigating her, there's no telling what she'll do." His warning proved prophetic. That afternoon, I discovered someone had broken into my apartment while Amanda and I were out. Nothing valuable was taken, but my laptop had been accessed, and the timeline notes on my wall had been photographed. The intruder hadn't bothered to return some papers to their original positions. "We need to be more careful," Amanda said, helping me gather my research materials. "Let's move everything to my place." As we packed, my phone chimed with a social media notification. A former college classmate, Damon, had messaged me. "Saw that article about TechVision. Weird coincidence. I just started at Comtech last month. Everything okay?" I stared at the message, an idea forming. Damon worked in product development. If Comtech was using stolen TechVision technology, he might have access to evidence. I called him immediately, explaining my situation in careful terms. "That's wild," Damon said when I finished. "And yeah, actually, there is something strange happening here. There's a new analytics project that got fast-tracked directly by the VP of Development. Very hush-hush, limited access. I'm only involved because they needed my encryption expertise." "When did this project start?" I asked, heart racing. "About 6 months ago," Damon replied. "But it's moving incredibly fast. Like they already had the framework built and just needed to implement it." "Because they did," I said. "It's my framework, stolen from TechVision." Damon was silent for a moment. "That's a serious accusation, Bev." "I know. But I can prove it if you help me." "What do you need?" "Access to the project specs. Anything that might show it originated from TechVision." Damon sighed. "I'll see what I can do. But be careful who you trust with this, Bev. Corporate espionage is big business." After hanging up, I did some deeper social media research on Stephanie. She had carefully curated her online presence, but there were still traces of her real activities if you knew where to look. A photo from a Comtech holiday party 2 years ago showed her in the background. A mutual connection had tagged her in a hiking trip with a man identified as Alex S., who I discovered was Alexander Stanfield, Comtech's vice president of development. She's still connected to Comtech, I told Grace and Amanda, showing them the photo evidence. And not just professionally. Look at how they're looking at each other in this hiking photo. They're involved romantically. So she gets hired at TechVision, steals your technology, feeds it to her boyfriend at Comtech, frames you when you get suspicious, and takes your job in the process, Amanda summarized. That's diabolical. And lucrative, Grace added. The kind of analytics platform you described could be worth millions in the market. If Comtech launches it first. TechVision loses everything, I finished, and I get blamed. Looking deeper into Stephanie's lifestyle raised more red flags. Her social media showed a luxury apartment, expensive vacations, and a brand new BMW, all seemingly beyond what her TechVision salary would support. She's being compensated for the corporate espionage, Grace concluded. Probably has been for years. I was compiling all this evidence into a comprehensive file when my phone rang. It was Andrew. Beverly, he said, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant. I've been thinking about our last conversation. You mean when you fired me without a fair investigation? I replied, unable to keep the bitterness from my voice. I've been reviewing some things, he continued, ignoring my comment. Some inconsistencies have come up. I'm not saying I believe you, but is there anything you want to tell me? Off the record? I considered my options carefully. Was this a genuine olive branch or an attempt to see what evidence I might have gathered? I've discovered some concerning information, I said cautiously, about Stephanie's past employment and current connections. I think TechVision is being targeted in a coordinated corporate espionage operation. Andrew was silent for so long I thought the call had dropped. Finally, he spoke. That's a very serious allegation. I know, and I have evidence to support it. Another long pause. I need to think about this. Don't contact me again. I'll reach out if necessary. The call ended, leaving me uncertain whether I'd just gained an ally or alerted the enemy to my progress. 2 days later, Damon called with news. You were right, Bev. The analytics platform is basically identical to what you described. And get this, it's being rushed to market before TechVision can launch theirs. Can you get me documentation proving it's the same technology? Already did, Damon said, sending it encrypted to that address you provided. But there's something else. The VP? Stanfield? He's planning to leave Comtech right after the launch, taking a huge bonus with him. And let me guess, I said, the final piece clicking into place. Stephanie recently booked an extended vacation starting next month? How did you know? Damon asked. Because they're planning to take the money and run, I replied. They know what they're doing is illegal. Once the product launches, they'll disappear before anyone connects the dots. What are you going to do? I looked at the wall of evidence we'd assembled. Technical logs, social media connections, product specifications, timeline of events, testimonies from former employees. I'm going to stop them, I said, and get my life back. You need a lawyer, Amanda insisted, after I explained my plan to confront TechVision with the evidence. She was right. Even with compelling evidence, I was up against powerful people with resources and reputations to protect. I needed professional guidance. Through a friend of Grace's, I connected with Sarah Winters, an attorney specializing in corporate espionage cases. Her office was modest, but her reputation was formidable. So you're the TechVision whistleblower, she said after I explained my situation. Except you're being framed as the perpetrator rather than the hero. Exactly, I confirmed, spreading out our evidence. I have proof that Stephanie has been systematically stealing company secrets and feeding them to Comtech, where she previously worked and maintains personal connections. Sarah reviewed our materials carefully, occasionally nodding or making notes. This is compelling, she admitted, especially the recovered access logs and the product specification comparisons. The personal connection between Stephanie and the Comtech VP is particularly damning. So you'll help me? Sarah leaned back in her chair. Yes, but we need to be strategic. Corporate espionage cases are complex, and companies often prefer to handle them quietly to avoid bad publicity. I don't want quiet, I said firmly. I want my name cleared publicly. Then, we need to build an airtight case and present it in a way that forces TechVision to acknowledge the truth. Sarah tapped her pen against her desk thoughtfully. And we need more allies. Following Sarah's advice, I reached out to the other employees Stephanie had pushed out. Together, we formed a coalition of victims, each with pieces of the puzzle that, when assembled, revealed the full extent of Stephanie's schemes. Jordan had preserved emails showing how Stephanie had manipulated project ownership disputes. Alicia had documentation of her innocence in the alleged client leak. And Taylor had records from his financial investigation that showed the same technical signatures as my case. It's a pattern, Sarah confirmed after reviewing everything. And patterns are compelling evidence in cases like this. While building our legal strategy, I received a message from an unfamiliar email address with the subject line, Job Opportunity? The body contained a single line. Thought you might be interested in this position at Fidelity Systems. Attached was a job description for a senior marketing analyst role. The salary was substantial, the benefits excellent, and the company reputable. I showed it to Amanda. Someone's trying to bribe me to go away. How do you know? The timing is too convenient. And look at the sender's address. It's a throwaway account. This is someone testing if I can be bought off. What will you do? I deleted the email. I'm not looking for another job. I'm looking for justice. I had a job interview scheduled the next day, one I'd arranged before discovering the full truth about Stephanie. Sitting in the waiting room of Wilson Technologies, I realized I couldn't go through with it. I'm sorry, I told the receptionist. I need to cancel my interview. There's something important I need to resolve at my previous position first. As I left the building, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. I couldn't move forward with my career until I'd cleared my name. That afternoon, Andrew called again. Beverly, he said, his voice tense. I've been doing some investigating of my own. I need to meet with you. We agreed to meet at a restaurant far from both TechVision and CompTech offices. Andrew arrived looking haggard, with dark circles under his eyes. I've made a terrible mistake, he admitted, after ordering a strong coffee. I should have listened to you and James from the beginning. Why didn't you? I asked, trying to keep the accusation from my tone. Andrew ran a hand through his hair. The evidence seemed so conclusive, and Stephanie had been whispering concerns about your behavior for weeks before the accusation. Small things that seemed inconsequential at the time, but primed me to believe the worst. Classic manipulation tactics, I noted. Yes, Andrew agreed miserably. But there's more. After our last conversation, I started looking into Stephanie's background myself. Her references checked out perfectly when we hired her. Too perfectly, I now realize. They were fabricated, I suggested. Completely. I called her supposed former manager at Telcom Solutions. The woman had never heard of Stephanie. This was new information. So she lied about her employment history before CompTech? Andrew nodded. And I discovered she's been accessing my private calendar and emails using a backdoor in our system. She knew exactly when I was meeting with executives and what topics we were discussing. She's been manipulating you from day one, I said. All of us. I feel like a fool, Andrew admitted. But I want to make it right. What do you need from me? A formal review meeting, I replied. With all key stakeholders present, I have evidence that will expose what's really happening. Andrew hesitated. Stephanie has allies in the company now. People who've benefited from her schemes or are too invested in the official narrative to question it. Then we need to make the evidence so compelling they can't ignore it, I insisted. Meanwhile, Stephanie had escalated her intimidation tactics. I received notice of a restraining order she had filed, claiming I was harassing her with false accusations and threatening behavior. This is actually good news, Sarah said when I called her in a panic. It shows she's worried. People who are secure in their position don't file defensive restraining orders. But how can I present my case if I legally can't be near her? We'll challenge it immediately, Sarah assured me, and use it as evidence of her attempts to silence you. 2 days later, Damon called with crucial information. I accessed the development logs for the analytics platform, he said, his voice hushed. The code architecture is identical to what you described as your work. And there are even comments in the code that reference TechVision's internal naming conventions. That's the smoking gun, I realized. Can you document it? Already done, Damon confirmed. But there's something else. Stanfield and a few other executives are having a champagne celebration today. I overheard them talking about beating TechVision to market and rendering their version obsolete. They're gloating, I said, anger rising. They think they've won. What's the next move? Damon asked. I looked at the calendar on my wall, where I'd circled the date of Comptech's planned product launch, just 2 weeks away. We end this, I said. Now, with Sarah's help, I prepared a comprehensive dossier containing all our evidence. The technical logs showing the pattern of breaches, testimony from former employees, documentation of Stephanie's relationship with Comptech executives, evidence of her fabricated employment history, and the damning product specifications showing my stolen work. Sarah arranged a formal meeting with TechVision's executive team, presenting it as an opportunity to avoid potentially damaging litigation. The stakes couldn't have been higher. My professional reputation and future hung in the balance. The night before the meeting, I barely slept. I rehearsed my presentation repeatedly, going over every detail, anticipating every possible objection or deflection. This would be my one chance to reveal the truth and reclaim my life. Ready? Amanda asked as she drove me to TechVision's offices the next morning. I took a deep breath, clutching my evidence folder. Ready. The conference room fell silent as I walked in, flanked by Sarah and Grace. The long table was surrounded by familiar faces. Andrew, Megan from HR, Jessica, James from IT, and other department heads. At the far end sat Stephanie, her expression a mixture of shock and contempt. But the most surprising presence was Patricia Collins, TechVision's CEO, whom I had only met twice during my 7 years with the company. Her sharp eyes assessed me as I took my seat. Miss Richards, she addressed me formally. I understand you've requested this meeting to present evidence contradicting your termination for corporate espionage. Yes, I replied, my voice steadier than I felt. But this isn't just about clearing my name. It's about exposing an ongoing corporate espionage operation targeting TechVision's intellectual property. Stephanie laughed derisively. This is absurd. We already have conclusive evidence of Beverly's guilt. Evidence that was fabricated, I countered, by the actual perpetrator. Patricia Collins raised a hand to silence further interruptions. We've agreed to hear you out, Miss Richards. Please proceed. With a nod to Sarah, I began methodically presenting our evidence. First, the technical logs showing the pattern of credential theft and data transfers occurring across multiple employee accounts. As you can see, I explained, gesturing to the projection screen, these breaches follow a consistent pattern that began exactly 8 months ago when Stephanie Harris joined TechVision. James nodded in confirmation when executives looked his way. I can verify these logs are authentic. They show systematic access using stolen credentials from multiple employees. Next, I presented the testimonies from Taylor, Alicia, and Jordan, all describing nearly identical patterns of sabotage and false accusations following conflicts with Stephanie. Each of these former employees was pushed out using the same methodology, I explained. First isolation, then sabotage, and finally false evidence of wrongdoing, all orchestrated by Stephanie Harris. Stephanie stood up abruptly. This is character assassination. These disgruntled ex-employees are just trying to justify their own failures. Is this character assassination too? I asked calmly, displaying screenshots of Stephanie at Comptech events, including photos with Alexander Stanfield, their VP of development. You deliberately concealed your employment at our direct competitor when applying to TechVision. Murmurs rippled around the table. Stephanie's face flushed. A previous job at a competitor isn't evidence of anything illegal, she insisted, but her voice had lost some of its confidence. Perhaps not by itself, I agreed. But combined with this, I displayed the evidence Damon had provided, showing CompTech's imminent analytics platform and its striking similarities to TechVision's proprietary technology. This is unmistakably based on the work I developed here. Work that only a handful of people had complete access to. Andrew leaned forward, frowning at the documents. This is practically identical to our platform. How did CompTech get this? Through systematic theft, I stated firmly. Carried out by someone with inside access who was simultaneously maintaining a personal relationship with CompTech's VP of Development. I displayed more evidence. Stephanie's luxury apartment lease, her expensive car purchase, international transfers to offshore accounts, all far beyond what her TechVision salary could support. And finally, I said, I'd like to play this recorded conversation between Alexander Stanfield and another CompTech executive, recorded legally by a CompTech employee who was concerned about potential illegality. Sarah pressed play on the audio file Damon had provided. Stanfield's voice filled the room. Once we launch next month, TechVision's version will be irrelevant. They won't even know what hit them until it's too late. The insider has given us everything we need. The room was silent as the recording ended. All eyes turned to Stephanie, whose composed facade had begun to crack. This is all circumstantial, she said, but her voice wavered. You have no direct proof that I transferred any files. Actually, James interjected, we do. He opened his laptop. While reviewing Miss Richards' evidence, I set up a monitoring system tracking all external file transfers. I was curious to see if the pattern she identified was still active. He turned his screen toward the executives. These logs show confidential files being transferred to an external server just yesterday using Director Andrew Miller's credentials. Andrew's eyes widened. I didn't authorize any transfers. Of course not, James agreed. Your credentials were stolen, just like Beverly's were. But here's the interesting part. I traced the access point. He looked directly at Stephanie. It came from your company laptop, Miss Harris. Stephanie's composure finally shattered. You can't prove that. It could have been anyone using my laptop. That's true, James acknowledged. Which is why I think we should check the current server logs. Right now. If there's nothing to hide, there should be no problem. Patricia Collins nodded to James. Do it. James typed rapidly, projecting his screen onto the wall. Lines of code scrolled past as he accessed the security monitoring system. Here are all active external connections right now, he explained. And here are the credential sets being used for each connection. A hush fell over the room as one line illuminated in red. User, Stephanie. Harris. Accessing. Project files. Analytics platform. Core architecture. Destination. External server 192.168. XXX. All eyes turned to Stephanie, whose face had gone pale. That's impossible, she whispered. I'm sitting right here. Remote access, James explained. Set up to run automatically at specific times. The transfers have been happening every day at exactly 10:15 a.m., which is right now. Stephanie lunged for her bag, but security personnel who had been standing quietly by the door moved quickly to intercept her. This is ridiculous, she shouted, struggling against their hold. You're all being manipulated. Beverly is the real criminal here. But her protests rang hollow as James continued displaying the evidence on screen, the ongoing data transfer happening under her credentials at that very moment. The destination server registered to a shell company linked to CompTech, the pattern of previous transfers matching exactly the timeline I had presented. Patricia Collins stood, her expression grave. Miss Harris, please surrender your company devices immediately. Security will escort you to a separate room while we contact the authorities. You can't do this, Stephanie hissed, looking frantically around the room for allies. Finding none, she changed tactics. Fine. You want the truth? Yes, I took the analytics platform, but only because it was wasted here. TechVision is too slow, too cautious. CompTech was willing to fast-track it, to pay what it's really worth. The admission hung in the air, recorded by the meeting's official minutes. Stephanie seemed to realize her mistake almost immediately, clamping her mouth shut. "Take her to my office," Patricia instructed security, "and contact the FBI's cybercrime division. This is now a criminal matter." As Stephanie was led away, still protesting, the room erupted in confused discussions. Patricia Collins raised her hand for silence. "Miss Richards," she said, turning to me, "it appears we owe you a significant apology and considerable compensation for the damage done to your reputation and career." "Thank you," I said, relief washing over me, "but what I want most is to clear my name publicly." "That will be arranged immediately," Patricia assured me, "along with your reinstatement, should you wish to return to TechVision." The meeting continued for another hour as we discussed the full implications of Stephanie's espionage and the steps needed to secure TechVision's systems. Throughout the discussion, I felt a weight lifting from my shoulders with each passing minute. The truth was finally out. As the meeting concluded, Jessica approached me with tears in her eyes. "I'm so sorry I doubted you, Beverly. I should have known better." "You came through when it mattered," I assured her, thinking of the USB drive that had helped break the case. Andrew also approached, his expression deeply remorseful. "I failed you as a leader," he admitted. "I let myself be manipulated instead of trusting someone with a 7-year track record of excellence." "We all learned valuable lessons," I said, not quite ready to fully forgive, but understanding the sophisticated nature of the deception. As we left the building, Grace squeezed my arm. "You did it," she said proudly. "You didn't just clear your name, you protected your company from a serious threat." "I couldn't have done it without you," I told her honestly. "Or Amanda, or Sarah, or all the others who believed in me." For the first time in weeks, I felt like I could breathe again. The truth had prevailed. My reputation would be restored. And Stephanie's carefully constructed house of lies had finally collapsed. In the weeks following Stephanie's exposure, life at TechVision transformed dramatically. The FBI's cybercrime division launched a full investigation into the corporate espionage operation, uncovering a scheme even more extensive than we had initially realized. Stephanie and Alexander Stanfield were arrested and charged with multiple federal crimes, including theft of trade secrets, wire fraud, and conspiracy. CompTech faced serious legal repercussions, their stock plummeting as the scandal broke. Their rushed analytics platform launch was halted by court order, preventing them from profiting from stolen technology. Patricia Collins called a company-wide meeting to publicly clear my name and announce my reinstatement at TechVision, with a promotion to Director of Product Innovation and a substantial compensation package for the damages I'd suffered. Beverly Richards exemplifies the integrity and perseverance we value at TechVision, she announced to the assembled staff. When faced with injustice, she didn't just fight for herself. She protected our company and our intellectual property. We owe her a debt of gratitude. The announcement was followed by a formal apology published in the same tech publications that had reported on the alleged espionage. My professional reputation was not just restored, but enhanced by how I had handled the crisis. Returning to my desk, now in a corner office with a better view of the Boston skyline, felt surreal. Colleagues who had avoided eye contact during my escort from the building now stopped by with congratulations and apologies. Some were genuine, others clearly uncomfortable and simply going through the motions. I accepted all graciously, understanding that Stephanie's manipulation had affected everyone, not just me. The most meaningful interactions came from those who had stood by me or helped uncover the truth. James from IT became a close colleague as we worked together to implement new security protocols to prevent future breaches. "The system is only as strong as the people using it," he reminded me, as we reviewed authentication procedures. "Technology can help, but awareness and vigilance are just as important." Jessica and I rebuilt our friendship over lunch meetings, where we discussed not just work but the psychological impact of betrayal and vindication. "I keep thinking about how easily we were all manipulated," she confessed one day. "How Stephanie played on our biases and insecurities to turn us against each other." "That's why it worked," I replied. "She understood people." not just technology. She knew exactly how to create doubt and exploit it. Andrew struggled the most with the aftermath, clearly haunted by his failure to trust a loyal employee over a manipulative newcomer. "I've been in management for 15 years, he told me during a project review. "I thought I was a good judge of character. This experience has forced me to reevaluate everything I thought I knew about leadership." "We all have blind spots," I assured him. "The important thing is learning from them." The most unexpected development came from Grace, my retired NSA neighbor who had been instrumental in uncovering Stephanie's scheme. "I'm thinking of starting a consulting business," she announced over coffee in my new office, "helping companies identify and prevent insider threats." After this experience, I realize how many organizations are vulnerable. "That's brilliant," I told her sincerely, "and Tech Vision should be your first client." Patricia Collins agreed enthusiastically when I made the introduction, and soon Grace was leading workshops for our security team, sharing her decades of cybersecurity expertise. My sister Amanda, who had provided crucial emotional support during the darkest days, teased me about my vindication. "I knew that wall of sticky notes would pay off," she joked during our weekly dinner. "Though I have to say, I'm glad to have my guest room back." "I'm glad to have my life back," I replied. As for Taylor, Alicia, and Jordan, the former employees who had suffered similar fates, Tech Vision offered them settlements, and, in Taylor's case, the option to return with his original name restored. Taylor declined but expressed gratitude for the vindication. "Some wounds take longer to heal," he told me when we met to celebrate the resolution, "but seeing justice served helps." 6 months after Stephanie's arrest, I sat in my office reviewing the final preparations for the analytics platform launch. My platform, developed ethically and now ready to transform the industry as I had originally envisioned. A knock at my door interrupted my thoughts. It was Damon, who had left CompTech after providing key evidence in the case. "Director Richards," he greeted me with a smile. "Your assistant said I could come right in. For the whistleblower who helped save my career?" "Absolutely." I stood to embrace my old friend. "How's the new job?" "Great," he replied, settling into a chair. "Working for an ethical company makes all the difference. I'm glad you landed on your feet after CompTech." "Speaking of which," Damon said, sliding a news article across my desk. "Thought you'd want to see this." The headline read, "Former CompTech executive sentenced to 8 years for corporate espionage." "Justice served," I murmured, scanning the details of Stanfield's sentencing. Stephanie's trial was still ongoing, but with the mountain of evidence against her, conviction seemed certain. "You know what amazes me most about this whole situation?" Damon asked. "What's that?" "How one person with integrity and persistence was able to bring down an entire conspiracy. You never gave up, even when it would have been easier to walk away." His words touched me deeply. "I couldn't let them win," I said simply. "Not just for me, but for everyone who was hurt by their schemes." That evening, I hosted a small gathering at my apartment. Grace, Amanda, Jessica, James, and others who had stood by me through the ordeal. As we shared food and stories, I felt a profound sense of gratitude for the community that had emerged from the crisis. When the conversation lulled, I raised my glass in a toast. "To truth," I said. "And to the people brave enough to stand for it, even when it's difficult." "To truth," they echoed, glasses clinking. Later, as the gathering wound down, Grace pulled me aside. "You know, when you first knocked on my door that day, you were broken," she said quietly. "Look at you now." I smiled, recognizing the truth in her words. The experience had changed me, made me stronger, more resilient, but also more compassionate. I learned that evidence and truth will always prevail if you're persistent enough, I told her. But I also learned the value of having people who believe in you when the evidence isn't yet clear. The next morning, I walked into Tech Vision with a renewed sense of purpose. The analytics platform would launch the following week, potentially transforming how companies understood and served their customers. But beyond the professional accomplishment, I carried a deeper sense of personal growth. I had faced betrayal and fought back. I had lost everything and rebuilt it stronger than before. And perhaps most importantly, I had discovered who would stand beside me when everything fell apart, and who wouldn't. As I settled at my desk to review the final launch preparations, an email arrived from Patricia Collins. Beverly, the board has unanimously approved the new security protocols you and Grace proposed. Implementation begins immediately. Your experience has made TechVision stronger and wiser. Thank you for fighting for the truth. I smiled, feeling a sense of closure. The injustice had been righted, the perpetrators held accountable, and systems put in place to protect others from similar experiences. My ordeal had transformed into a force for positive change, not just for me, but for an entire company. When I reflected on the journey, from the shock of false accusation to the triumph of vindication, I realized the most valuable lesson. Trust your instincts, gather your evidence, and never stop fighting for the truth. With perseverance and integrity, justice will eventually prevail. Have you ever faced a situation where you were falsely accused or had to fight to prove your innocence? How did you handle it? Comment below and share your story. And if you found value in my experience, please like this video, subscribe to the channel for more real-life stories, and share with someone who might need to hear that truth can triumph over deception. Thank you for listening, and remember, your integrity is your most powerful asset, even when it seems like the world has turned against you.